Three big fights have just been announced by Dana White on all UFC social media platforms. We have the co-main event for UFC 295 being Yuri Prochazka versus Alex Pereira for the vacant light heavyweight championship. We have UFC 296 being headlined by Leon Edwards versus Colby Covington for the welterweight title. And then we have Alejandro Pantoja versus Brandon Royval as the co-main event for the flyweight championship. So a lot of really interesting matchups there. Really big announcements as well. I'm looking on Tapology. They haven't filled out UFC 296 yet, and I believe the co-main event for UFC 295 was pretty much what they're filling out on that card. So we finally got that announcement. I was kind of hoping it was going to be Edwards versus Covington on that John Jones card, but I think the rumors, I guess, were true that John Jones probably didn't want him on that card, or they just figured that Yuri Prochazka versus Alex Pereira couldn't stand alone on its own card and sell as many pay-per-views. So either way, two really good cards back-to-back, which I'm pretty excited about, but I'm going to basically give a preview on what I think about these fights. I think I have done like an early prediction or breakdown of Edwards versus Covington a while ago, so it may change a little bit, but if you want to check that out, you can go ahead and check that out for yourselves. But I'm going to preview each matchup here. I'll probably do an in-depth breakdown of all these matchups relatively soon. So if you want to stay tuned for that, you can go ahead and do that as well. But going into the first fight that was announced for UFC 295 as the co-main event, we have Yuri Prochazka versus Alex Pereira for the vacant light heavyweight title. I wanted to say interim for some reason, but vacant light heavyweight title. Obviously, Yuri Prochazka vacated it after he beat Glover at UFC 275. They were going to do the rematch in December, ended up vacating it, and then Glover didn't want to take the short notice fight against whoever they're going to offer, so it was going to be Ankalaev versus Blachowicz. Ended up being a draw, so they made Jamal Hill versus Teixeira. Teixeira ended up getting his butt beat pretty badly in that matchup, so Jamal Hill won, and then Jamal Hill vacated the title there. So it's coming back full circle. We have Yuri Prochazka fighting in December against Alex Pereira, which is Glover Teixeira's guy. That he has been training, has been grooming into the UFC and MMA his whole entire career. So everything kind of just comes full circle. It's going to be a very interesting matchup. And now for the fight itself, I think I may lean it to Alex Pereira in this matchup, just because Yuri Prochazka, with a very long layoff, he hasn't fought in well over a year and a half at this point. By the time this fight happens, I think it will be a year and a half, because he did fight in July on UFC 275 in Singapore. So it has been a very, very long time since he's fought. He is coming off a very bad shoulder injury, for at least what we've been told from Dana White in the UFC. So we don't know what he'll look like, but with Yuri Prochazka, you can never really discount him in matchups because he does have such a weird style. And although he can get rocked and can get hurt, and Alex Pereira does have some insane power in his hands, you do kind of Yuri Prochazka is just such a weird fighter, where you can see him catching a guy like Pereira, who isn't as defensively aware as what an Israel Adesanya. Obviously, Pereira's a much bigger guy. He's going to be not as fast as Israel Adesanya, but the power is the big difference there. But he is very open on the feet. But I think Alex Pereira, if he's looking into this matchup, will probably be looking for leg kicks just to chop down Yuri Prochazka, slow down the weird movement of Yuri, because he does, again, Yuri Prochazka is also very open, but it's his style. For Alex Pereira, he's open so he can counter. It's a much different style there. So we'll see how this one goes. I'm not too 100% on either one of these guys. I'll probably just edge it to Pereira because, again, we have Yuri Prochazka, who's coming off a long layoff and an injury, and his style allows him to get hit quite a bit. And if you get hit by Alex Pereira, it's been shown that you're going to not have a good success rate of being conscious afterwards. So Alex Pereira is an absolute crazy guy in that cage. He just beat Jan Blachowicz in a pretty close matchup, but I think he won that one clear in my mind, at least. I think it was pretty arguable for some of the fan base, but I thought he won that one for sure. And at altitude against a wrestler, so he showed he can do that. Yuri Prochazka is not going to wrestle with him, but we'll see how he looks at light heavyweight in this match of 5 rounds. Should be a pretty fun fight. Moving on, let's go to the headliner of UFC 296. We got Leon Edwards versus Colby Covington again. I think I already have an early prediction and breakdown of this matchup. You can check it out after this video or whatever. I might make a new one. Who knows? Things have changed, but I'm sticking with my prediction of Colby Covington in this one. I think he's just going to drown Edwards. What I do see some people say, which is a little bit incorrect, you see on paper a wrestler and another wrestler oh, he's just going to do the same thing that he did to Kamaru Usman. The difference between Kamaru Usman and Colby Covington is a pressure guy. He's not going to be as stocky and built like Kamaru Usman, who uses a lot of his strength into his wrestling. Colby Covington is more of a guy that's going to push you up against the fence, wear on you, and take you down that way. He's going to grind you down to the ground. Kamaru Usman is going to use a lot of his strength and dump you on the ground. And the thing with Kamaru Usman, he's not as pressure heavy as Colby Covington. I think the pressure of Colby Covington can be a really big problem for Leon Edwards, because when you have the Leon Edwards and Kamaru Usman fight, Kamaru Usman was kind of just tracking down Leon Edwards as he was circling around. And when he would go in for takedowns, Leon would shoot up that knee, which could be a potential danger for Colby Covington in this one. But the thing with Colby is that the pressure, he's just going to stay on you. Like, if you defend the takedown, he's going to be back on you. He's going to keep going. And I think he's just going to wear on Leon Edwards. Like, you saw Leon Edwards at altitude against Kamaru Usman. Kamaru Usman's not that much of like a dominant wrestler. Like, he'll outmuscle you on the ground. And you saw Leon Edwards get kind of deterred that way. Imagine what Colby Covington's pace on Leon Edwards would do to Leon Edwards. So I am going to go with Colby Covington, probably by decision. Colby just got his black belt in jiu-jitsu, so maybe he can get a submission, like a rear naked choke against the fence off like a deterred Leon Edwards who's super tired and super open that way. So maybe Colby can sneak in a submission in the later rounds, but I think a decision is probably the safer bet here. Colby also hasn't been that active, so we'll see how that impacts his fight. It could definitely be a pretty big impact here, because we saw Colby Covington against Kamaru Usman, and he got dropped initially and didn't really like set into it, really wake up until 3, 4, and 5, and it was already too late. Like, Kamaru should have gotten to 10-8 in that second round. He won that first round, so I thought it should have been a draw, but again, if Colby Covington was ready and a little bit more active for that fight, I think he probably would have had a really solid chance at winning that fight, but didn't happen. So we are seeing an inactive Colby Covington, but I think if Colby Covington just sticks to the pace and just goes to out-wrestle Leon Edwards in this matchup, I think he does win. Leon Edwards isn't going to have as good of takedown defense as Kamaru Usman, so Colby Covington can definitely look for those takedowns quite a bit and not have to worry about the striking of Kamaru Usman. So we'll see how this one goes. I am going to go with Colby Covington, though. I am going to edge it to him. I think this is going to be a relatively close fight. I think Colby does get hurt early on, but I think he still just goes forward and just swarms Leon Edwards, and I think it'll just be too much for him. So I'm going with Colby Covington. The next fight that was announced, we have Alejandro Pantoja versus Brandon Royval. Now, this is another interesting matchup. I do like that it is not Brandon Moreno, because I think Brandon Moreno is on like 5 title fights in a row and hasn't defended the belt at all. I think, what was it? You had the Figueiredo fight that was a draw. You had the rematch where Brandon Moreno won, and then you had the other rematch, the trilogy, where Figueiredo won. And then before that, I think Brandon Moreno got the interim belt against Kai Kara France, and then you had him fight against Figueiredo, and then you had him fight against Alexander Pantoja, and he lost again. So he has never defended his belt at flyweight, and I think he's won it 2 times. So I didn't like that they were kind of edging towards Brandon Moreno getting the rematch. I didn't like that at all. So I'm happy Brandon Royval's getting the step up here. Alejandro Pantoja has already beaten Brandon Royval, I think, like a second round submission in their last fight about 2 years ago. So he does have a pretty dominant victory over Brandon Royval. I think he can do the same here. Obviously, Alejandro Pantoja does have some very high level grappling, and his work on the feet is pretty impressive as well. Like, he just walks guys down and just scraps. You saw that in his last fight. That last fight against Brandon Moreno was incredible. That was a really fun fight to watch. I thought it was a little bit more clear for Alejandro Pantoja than what the scorecard said. And a lot of fans said it for some reason. I had it like 3-2. If not, like, you could probably argue 4-1, which I don't think a lot of people like that. But I think 3-2 probably is what a lot of people agree on in that fight. I thought Pantoja definitely got some of those rounds, especially towards the end when he got the back. That was pretty clear for him in that matchup. But Alejandro Pantoja walks guys down, has a lot of power in his hands, and you saw that against Brandon Moreno. Brandon Moreno did not deal with the power too well early on in that matchup. So it was pretty back and forth, but you definitely saw Pantoja, a guy that's just going to walk you down and just scrap. He's just going to keep going forward even if he gets hit. So Brandon Royval is very good on the feet, but I think Alejandro Pantoja is more, I'll say, well-rounded. A lot of flyweights are well-rounded, but I think Pantoja, with the high-level grappling and with the fact that he can pretty much scrap with anybody at flyweight, just walking forward and with the power in his hands, he can just walk these guys down and impose his will on them. I think that definitely gives him an advantage in a lot of these fights. And the thing with Brandon Royval's last fight was a win over Matheus Nicolau, which is a pretty impressive win. But the Machinel fight, I think he did get dropped or something like that in that matchup. It was pretty close or pretty even for a guy again like Machinel. I think Machinel is good. If he had a chin, he would probably be a lot better in a pretty high-ranked flyweight. But I don't know. I think Brandon Royval hasn't really crazily improved as much as like an Alejandro Pantoja has. So I am going to go with Pantoja here, probably by submission in like the second or third round. I'll probably say third round submission. I think Pantoja drops Brandon Royval and then just hops on his back and gets the rear naked choke. So that's what I'm going to go in that matchup. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know what matchup you guys are most excited about, what you think about all these fights, and I'll see you guys next time.